Story time. I want to tell you how I finally figured out how the technical side of cameras work, and it wasn't any school or class. So stick around for my not so secret of how I learned to shoot in manual. Photography seems to run in my blood. I didn't know it at the time, but my late grandfather was big into photography at one point. I know this now because my grandmother gave me this, which used to belong to him. It's actually lesson books from the New York Institute of Photography. And there are a ton of instructional photos and words to teach you about photography. And my mom, well, even though she's a point and shoot type person, she has likely pressed the shutter button on a camera more times than I ever have. At every meal and any social gathering, you better believe she has a camera nearby or in her hand, ready to capture the memories. It's so much so that even though I bring my camera almost everywhere, I won't pull it out if she's got hers in her hand. As for myself, I remember spending my allowance on a point and shoot film camera back in the early 90s. It was an Olympus something, but it was pretty great until I got my developed film back and realized I just wasted money trying to capture birds in flight and ended up with shots that look like this. Wow, some of these photos are pretty dang old. Did I ever tell you that I was in Japan at one point? Kodak developed Kodak color print. In high school, I took it a little more seriously and I signed up for an actual photography class. But if I'm being honest, I didn't pay attention to any of the technical stuff. I just wanted to shoot things and also go through that mysterious revolving door that led into the dark room. I did end up with a few images I was proud of, and I'd show you, but regrettably, I have no idea where they are today. Then, in the late 90s came digital cameras. I was super intrigued by the ability to shoot and see what I captured in that instant, right in the back of the screen. And if it sucked, I didn't have to waste any money printing it, I'd just delete it. My first digital camera was this one right here, the Fujifilm FinePix MX700. I even had their Fuji photo printer at the time and I used it, but I do remember the printer being pretty pricey. And the paper. Did I say paper? Printing paper. Anyways. Again, I used it and pretty much just shot in auto. This trend continued throughout my 20s. Upgrading to slightly better digital cameras as technology improved. I do remember rocking the Casio XLMs because they had super quick startup times and they were sleek and fit in your pocket very easily. Later on, I upgraded to Pentax cameras because they had these waterproof ones that were really nice. And then after that, I jumped over to the Sony waterproof cameras, which had really nice photo quality. And all this time, I'm still shooting on some form of auto. Exposure triangle? What's that? White balance? ISO? Aperture? Why bother? Press the button, get picture, no good? Press button again. It wasn't until just before my daughter was born that things changed. My wife is pregnant and she gives me a new camera. This is the one I've been eyeballing for. It had rave reviews. Something about a 1-inch sensor, but still fits in your pocket, and it was version 2. So you know they got the bugs worked out, and 2 is higher than 1, so it's gotta be better. It wasn't cheap, but my wife knew how much I loved taking photos, and we figured we'd want a nice camera for all the photos we'll be taking of our first child. As all parents do. This camera was the Sony RX100 Mark II. And yes, for the first year of owning it, I still shot on auto. Or Intelligent Auto Plus, whatever that meant. But I loved it. It wasn't until I started looking at the images taken by other photographers that something changed my thinking of this craft. You see, this camera had a mini cult following, some of which were really good photographers with actual expensive gear. Yet they used this one for travel or for their everyday carry instead of their big and heavy DSLRs. And their images looked...
Amazing.
I had to do a double take. I thought to myself, how is it that their images looked so good? We have the same camera. What am I missing? What am I doing wrong? Did my photos suck that bad? No, not really. They were good and many of them even turned out great. Much better than the photos from past cameras. Sorry cameras, I still love you. But I felt like I didn't have control of it, and that's because I didn't. I was still shooting in auto. Then I realized, unlike most of my previous cameras, this one could actually shoot in manual. So I tried it. And I had no idea what I was doing. I had to figure this out. But how? I had a good feel for composition, but I had no idea how to understand what these settings did and ultimately how they affected the images. I started to look at the EXIF data, which is the settings that the camera embeds into each photo file, and I was still confused, and I felt discouraged. But in the back of my head, I knew I had the tool in my hand. I just had to learn how to best use it. I kept shooting in auto, but this time I started looking at the numbers on the back of the screen. When does it increase ISO? How is the aperture changing my image? And why is the shutter speed increasing every time I zoom in? I also looked back on those images that other photographers captured with the same camera and looked at their image settings. I started watching YouTube videos to get a grasp on the exposure triangle, and slowly, I started to see the patterns. Like an investigator staring at a bunch of clues on the wall, the lines started to match up. I figured out the ballpark numbers for different scenarios, and I understood when and why I should let in more exposure one way over the other. Now, this didn't make me a good photographer right off the bat, but it helped me see things differently, and I saw potential in things I otherwise wouldn't have. And it got me started wanting to try new things. Ultimately, I ended up getting an interchangeable lens camera system to increase my quality and capabilities, which led me to attempt my first 52-week photography challenge, which, in my opinion, really got me to learn new things. But I already made another video explaining how that experience also changed my photography, so link up here or in the description. But yeah, you might want to check that one out because it was also a good lesson. As much as photography is about capturing what you see, the need to understand the technical side of the camera cannot be understated enough. More opportunities and inspirations open up as you realize what that magical light gathering tool in your hand can do. So if you are still shooting in auto, that's okay. I did it for almost 2 decades. But if you're interested in upping your game, start paying attention to those numbers that your camera is choosing for aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Get inspired by looking at other images from photographers shooting with the same camera setup that you have, and eventually, things will start to click, mentally and physically. Also, for those of you who already made the switch to manual, I'm curious, how long did you shoot on full auto? Leave a comment down below. It definitely took me way too long to start learning, and if I'm being honest, I'm still usually shooting in aperture priority. Anyways, I hope you're able to gain something from this story or found it inspirational for your photography journey. If you did, do me a solid and hit the like button so that this video gets suggested to other like-minded people. Also, hit that subscribe button and the bell for more camera talk like this. my photography behind the scene vlogs, and random gear chat. That's Ginter for now. Remember that every time you get out to shoot is another opportunity to gain more followers. Is another opportunity to share beautiful photos and stories. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. More followers? Come on, man. What are you thinking about?